June 6, 1944. A date that would define the 20th century. A grey cold dawn over the English Channel. Thousands of ships rocking on the dark waves. Hundreds of thousands of men waiting in silence. And behind them, years of preparation, sacrifice, and fear. This was D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in human history. An operation so vast, so complex, that failure would have meant not just defeat, but the death of hope itself. But to truly understand that morning, we must go back. Europe, 1940. France had fallen. Hitler's armies swept across the continent like wildfire. The British army had barely escaped at Dunkirk. The Soviet Union was bleeding on the Eastern Front, and America, still recovering from the Great Depression, watched from across the ocean, unsure whether to get involved. Then came Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. A single day that transformed the United States from isolation to total war. Factories roared to life. Millions enlisted, and America became what President Roosevelt called the arsenal of democracy. By 1943, the tide of war was turning. North Africa had fallen. Italy was invaded. But Hitler still held the fortress of Europe. The only way to end the war was to break through his Atlantic wall and open a Western front. That task fell to one man, General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Ike, as his men called him, wasn't a battlefield general. He was a leader of men, a diplomat, a strategist, a man who could unite egos and armies under one command. His mission, plan the invasion of Nazi-occupied France. The codename was Operation Overlord. Planning began in secrecy in 1943. Every detail, every tide, every beach, every bomb had to be perfect. The Allies built entire fake armies in England, complete with inflatable tanks and wooden planes to fool German intelligence. Radio chatter was filled with false coordinates. Even the weather reports were classified. The Germans knew an invasion was coming, but not where or when. Hitler believed it would be at Pas-de-Calais, the shortest route across the Channel. He stationed his best divisions there. But the Allies had chosen another place, Normandy. 5 beaches, Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, each assigned to a different Allied nation. 160,000 men would land on the first day, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft. A logistical miracle that would either save the world or drown it in blood. In the final days before the invasion, England became one massive camp. Convoys filled the roads. Soldiers wrote letters home, knowing many would never be sent. Chaplains gave final prayers, and Eisenhower himself visited the troops. He smiled, shook hands, and told them, "The eyes of the world are upon you." But behind that calm face, he carried a secret in his pocket. A letter taking full responsibility in case the invasion failed. On the night of June 5th, the weather turned bad. Winds howled across the Channel. Waves crashed violently. Commanders hesitated. Should they delay? Meteorologists predicted a brief break in the storm, a small window of calm. Eisenhower made the decision. Okay, let's go. At that moment, 7,000 ships began to move. The greatest armada the world had ever seen. As the ships crossed the Channel, Allied paratroopers were already in the air. Thousands of them, from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, flying through darkness and flak toward the French countryside. Their mission, capture bridges, destroy German defenses, and sow confusion behind enemy lines. The sky was chaos. Anti-aircraft fire filled the night with explosions. Planes were hit. Men jumped early, some miles from their drop zones. Many drowned in flooded fields. Others landed directly among German troops. But despite the confusion, the paratroopers fought fiercely, cutting communication lines, ambushing convoys, and capturing key towns like Sainte-Mère-Église. Meanwhile, out at sea, the invasion fleet approached Normandy. It was 5:30 a.m. On the horizon, the glow of dawn revealed the outline of the French coast. German bunkers were ready. Machine guns pointed toward the beaches. Mines and obstacles lined the shore. And then it began. Naval guns roared. Battleships fired thousands of shells at the coastline. The sky lit up with fire. The roar was deafening. At 6:30 a.m., the first landing craft hit the beaches. At Utah Beach, the Americans landed off course, but it turned out to be a blessing. Resistance was lighter, and within hours, they secured the beach. At Gold, Juno, and Sword, the British and Canadians fought through heavy fire but broke through. German defenses. But at Omaha Beach, everything went wrong. The tide was high. Mines and obstacles wrecked landing craft. Artillery shells exploded among the waves. Machine guns cut down entire squads before they even reached the sand. Men dove into the surf. hiding behind bodies, debris, anything that could shield them. Boats burned. The water turned red. Radio channels were chaos. One soldier later said, "It was like walking into hell." Commanders considered pulling back, but small groups of men, sergeants, engineers, medics, started moving forward on their own. They crawled up the cliffs, threw grenades into bunkers, and cleared the way inch by inch. By noon, Omaha Beach was still a slaughterhouse. But by evening, it was American soil. Across the coastline, Allied troops were finally linking up. By nightfall, 156,000 men had landed in France. The cost was staggering, over 10,000 casualties on the first day. But they had done it. The Atlantic Wall was broken. Hitler's fortress had been breached. That night, as reports came in, Eisenhower sat quietly in his tent. He knew this was only the beginning. The hardest fighting was still ahead. But for the first time in years, there was hope. Europe was no longer in darkness. The road to victory had begun on those bloody beaches of Normandy. June 7th, 1944. The beaches of Normandy were finally in Allied hands. But the real battle was only beginning. Behind the beaches stretched the heart of Hitler's empire. A maze of hedgerows, fields and fortified towns. Each corner hid snipers, mortars, and machine guns. Every mile would be paid for in blood. The soldiers were exhausted, wet, and shaken. Many hadn't slept for days, but they knew what was at stake. Behind them, the sea. Ahead of them, Europe's freedom. The Americans moved inland through a nightmare of mud and gunfire. The bocage country of Normandy was like a natural fortress. Thick hedges, ancient stone walls, and sunken lanes gave the Germans perfect cover. Tanks could barely move. Every field became a trap. The Germans, battle-hardened. Veterans from the Eastern Front fought with brutal skill. They called the Americans green troops, but soon realized these men were learning fast. The U.S. Army adapted with terrifying speed. Infantry squads began using bulldozers and dynamite to blast through the hedgerows. Tanks were fitted with steel prongs, nicknamed rhino horns, to tear open paths through the countryside. Every day they pushed deeper. Every day more men died. Meanwhile, the skies belonged to the Allies. American and British bombers filled the heavens. They turned railways, supply lines, and German reinforcements into twisted metal and fire. The Luftwaffe was broken. It could no longer protect its troops. For the first time, German soldiers looked up and saw only American planes. In Berlin, Hitler refused to believe the truth. He ordered his generals to counterattack, again and again. But every move he made only bled his army further. His once invincible panzer divisions were being destroyed by airstrikes and artillery before they even reached the front. By late June, the Allies had established a solid foothold in Normandy. But progress was slow, measured in yards, not miles. Then came Operation Cobra. It was Eisenhower's plan to finally break out of the bocage. General Omar Bradley, leading the 1st U.S. Army, ordered one of the most intense bombardments in history. Thousands of bombers flew overhead, dropping tons of explosives on the German lines near St. Lo. The ground shook like an earthquake. Fire and smoke filled the sky. And when it cleared, the Americans charged. The breakout was brutal. Tanks smashed through the shattered defenses. Infantry surged forward, cutting off German units and pushing them into chaos. In days, the U.S. Army advanced farther than it had in a month. The Germans tried to regroup, but it was too late. The Falaise pocket closed around them. Over 50,000 German soldiers were trapped. The air was filled with the thunder of bombs and the screams of engines. When it was over, the roads were lined with burning tanks, broken guns, and the bodies of men who had once believed they could rule the world. The German army in France was finished. The road to Paris was open. As the Allies advanced, the French resistance rose up. Saboteurs blew up bridges, ambushed convoys, and cut German communications. In city after city, the swastika was torn down, and the tricolor rose again. On August 25, 1944, American troops entered Paris. Crowds filled the streets, crying, laughing, throwing flowers. The bells of Notre Dame rang for the first time in 4 years. General Charles de Gaulle marched down the Champs-Élysées, declaring, "Paris! Paris outraged! Paris broken! Paris martyred! But Paris liberated!" The world saw it and realized the tide had truly turned. Across Europe, fear spread through the ranks of the Wehrmacht. German officers who once mocked America now whispered in disbelief. How could a nation of businessmen and farmers build an army like this? The answer was simple: industry, spirit, and unity. Back in the US, factories worked day and night. Women built planes and tanks faster than the Axis could destroy them. Men who had never seen war became soldiers, pilots, engineers. Every corner of America contributed: steel from Pittsburgh, oil from Texas, ships from California. It was a war machine unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. By autumn 1944, the Allies stood at the borders of Germany. But Hitler was not done yet. In December, he launched one last desperate gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. In the snow-covered forests of Belgium, 200,000 German soldiers attacked through the Ardennes, smashing into the thin American lines. The weather grounded Allied planes. The sky was gray. Snow fell thick. The enemy seemed endless. For days, the Americans fought alone. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne was surrounded and cut off. The Germans demanded their surrender. General McAuliffe's reply became legend. Nuts. The Americans dug in. They fought without food, without rest, without air support. And when the skies finally cleared, the full power of the U.S. Air Force returned. Bombers roared overhead. Columns of tanks rolled in. The Bulge collapsed. Germany's last hope vanished under the snow. By spring 1945, the Allies crossed the Rhine. Hitler's empire was burning from both sides. The Soviets closing in from the east. The Americans and British from the west. When the U.S. Army liberated the concentration camps, the soldiers saw what they were truly fighting for. The horror. The inhumanity. The millions murdered. It wasn't just about victory anymore. It was about justice. On April 30th, 1945, deep beneath Berlin, Adolf Hitler took his own life. A week later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. When the news reached the U.S., crowds poured into the streets. Men hugged strangers. Women wept with joy. Church bells rang from coast to coast. But the cost was unimaginable. Over 400,000 Americans dead. Millions worldwide. Cities turned to dust. Families broken forever. And yet through the ashes, something powerful was born. The United States had emerged as a global superpower, not just because of its weapons, but because of its will. Because of its belief that freedom was worth fighting for. From the beaches of Normandy to the snows of Bastogne to the heart of Berlin, ordinary men had done the impossible. Hitler's fortress had fallen. The world was free again. And it all began with the storm over Normandy. On June 6, 1944, the free world took its first step toward victory. They came not as conquerors, but as liberators. And in doing so, they changed history forever.